Hey, how are you doing, everybody? Let's take a look at the CRAAP test. This is a way that you could go through a source and do some evaluation on it to see if it's a valid and useful source for you. Now, first off, um, I cannot take credit for the CRAAP test. This is a method and a paper that's been passed around, and I've inherited it from two or three different sources, and I've modified it over the years and stuff. So anyway, I do like it, and I do appreciate it, and I think it does a really good job for what we're trying to do. But I cannot take credit for creating this. And I also appreciate the name, right? Because if the source doesn't meet the standards, it may just be crap, right? Um, I also want to say that this is an important step because you are asking people to buy into the information you're presenting and sharing based on the value of the sources that you're using. You're saying, here's some information. I got it from this source, right? And the audience is assuming that you've done the best work and you've got the best sources. So first off, they're going to come in with that. But if they have any kind of indication, suggestion that it's not a valid source, they're really going to turn on you quickly, right? Because this is going to be a thing that the audience is expecting you to have done. Okay. And so you lose that trust with your audience, right? I also think it's important too to understand the value of the sources, because if you don't understand it and if you're not convinced of it, then you might question, you might be using bad information. And so not only are you using bad sources to share with your audience, your readers, you're giving them the incorrect information, right? It's a bad source, but it's also bad information. So it's important to really go through these steps and understand. So let's take a look at the sheet here and how you would fill this out. So first off, the title, put that right in there, right? Like, what is the title of the work? Currency is when was it published? Now, so this is kind of important because it lets you know like when it was done, so you can kind of put it in context if the topic has been changing over time, if it's evolving, if new information has been found, right? It also helps you if it's like a website, if it's been updated recently, then you have some indication that somebody's taking care of it, right? If there's no date on it or the date's really old, you got to question like, is it just forgotten? Like, is nobody using it? Now, if it's an old date, it doesn't mean that it isn't good, but it does mean that you have to be aware of the date and the limitation of that, right? Because it's not new information. It isn't bad though, because maybe you want stuff from before and you're going to compare it to something newer, right? So again, the date helps us put this in context. Now, the date will appear either right around the author's name at the very top, or it'll be at the very bottom of the page. Normally it's at the very top. It might also include some sort of phrasing like updated, reposted, revised, something like that, right? It might have some sort of qualification with it. If there is no date, then you might use the copyright date at the bottom, right? If you go all the way to the very bottom of the page and you see the copyright date, you could use that as well. And again, these are on websites, okay, mainly on websites where you have those kinds of places. If it's a print source, it's generally going to be at the very top of that document, and it's going to be definitely in that citation information. If there is no date, that doesn't mean that it isn't usable automatically, but it is something you got to really think about, because if there's no date, you don't really have any way of knowing how new or old that information is. The next line is relevance. Why did you pick this text? So when you look at this source, why did you pick this text? Why did you pick this article? Why did you pick this website? What made you key in on it? So these will be things like it answers the question of whatever, right? It gives background on. It's a personal narrative, and I wanted to give a personal viewpoint on this, right? So what made you pick this as a source? And then how does it relate to the topic? Authority, who is the author, and what are their credentials? Now, so let's say that you go to a website and you pull it up and you see at the top under the headline, there's by so-and-so. You click on that. Hopefully there's a hot link. You can click on it and you can go and you can read about them. That gives you your credentials, right? Maybe you'd have to Google search that to author, right? So again, you're going to have to do a little bit of work, but it's all about how do we know that the person that produced this work is an expert and is valid and has the right credentials to be sharing that particular information. If there is no author, again, that doesn't automatically disqualify it, but you do got to really think like, okay, how do I know this is a valid source? Now, if there is no author, then you start to think about who is the publisher. Okay, who published this information? Now, this is not www.something.com or something like that, right? Like a lot of people try to use like the website as the publisher. That's not. It's who owns that website, right? If you scroll to the very bottom of the page next to the copyright date, there generally is some sort of name next to it. That's the person who copyrighted it. That would be the publisher. You could also go to the About Me page. If it wasn't there, if it wasn't clear, you go to the About Me page and that information will be there as well. And in all those cases, whether it's an author, a publisher, whatever, then you need to put why you believe they're credible. This is a news source. This is a major network affiliated website. This is a professor at whatever university, right? What gives them, not just that they are an expert, but what gives them that expert? Accuracy. Why do you feel that this information is accurate and valid? So those are going to be things like they cited their sources. There's they reference credible sources. Maybe it's that they did new study. This is a brand new study. This is brand new information. Maybe that it comes from this source and this source is really reputable or the leader in this, right? Maybe it's the fact that the website is clean, that's free of errors. It doesn't have a lot of grammar mistakes. It looks maintained, right? What gives you a sense that this information is really good? Some of it's going to be very specific, meaning like I can see credibility in there, expert in there. Some of it is just the feel that you might get. And finally, the purpose. Why was this written? What was the author trying to do by writing this? Was it persuasive? Was it informative? Was it to give a new viewpoint? Was it to give a personal narrative and a personal side to the story? What was the goal of that? Once you've answered those questions, then you can come down here to the scorecard. And this is where you really start to make some evaluations, because you could find an author and you could find some credentials, but maybe they're not the most expert, right? And so, you start to weigh some of these things. And so again, it's the same headings. We have some boxes here checking yes or no. And in these blue boxes here, you give it a score between 1 and 10. 1 being really not, 10 being very much so, right? And you can give a number anywhere in between. And then you go through, again, these are the same things that we looked at on the front. And then you give yourself a score, okay? You give this a score, total down here. And then this gives you some sort of sense of where you're at. Now, again, this isn't perfect, because if you are tricked, you're going to score it higher in some areas, right? And so it might come across as more credible than what it may really be, right? But it's this idea that you've taken the time, you've done the look, and you feel it's credible, and you pass that on, to your readers. Okay. Again, in the end, the thing you want to really remember is that you have to do the things that you can to make sure that the source is valid and credible, because when you give it to other people to read, when you use it in your work, you're asking them to buy into it, right? And you want to keep that trust, and you want to keep that expert voice, and you want to make sure that you are doing the best work that you can to get your message across to other people.